A found footage movie is a film that can be captured from the perspective of a character. We, the viewer, see what the character sees. It is a subgenre of horror movies that has a special place in my heart. These movies can also be referred as POV horror movies, so sorry if I jump between titles throughout the video. The first POV movie ever made that I could find online was called Lady in the Lake from 1946, and this kind of style was a rarity in film. If you look at the first POV horror movies, Cannibal Holocaust is often claimed to be the first example of found footage horror movies. But the subgenre was popularized by the likes of Blair Witch, which is a found footage horror movie that documents three students venturing into the depths of a forest, and since then, these movies have had a fluctuating timeline of existence. After Blair Witch, I fell in love with these movies, but the movie that has stuck with me the most is titled VHS, the original. I know it has a few sequences, but they weren't that great, and even though the original VHS wasn't amazing, I still really loved it. And this movie was the film that kind of confirmed to me that I love this style of filmmaking and spiraled me into Google searches such as best POV horror movies, best found footage movies, or movies similar to VHS. The subgenre gained a large amount of popularity in the mid-2010s in films such as Above, So Below, Creep, and VHS, which I've already mentioned, alongside many more. But all of these movies share the similarity of having very average ratings, and with that, I've never really reflected upon my love for the subgenre. But I also wanted to understand these ratings and their place in the horror genre as a whole. So, why do I love them? The most obvious answer is that it puts me, the viewer, in the shoes of the person experiencing the terror. And in return, I feel a lot more immersed in the movie, but also engaged in the film. I like pretending that I'm the character that is in danger, surrounded by mystery, and I love experiencing all of that, but also simultaneously knowing that I'm safe. Compared to a standard movie, the threat is just different for me. Don't get me wrong, I adore horror movies of any subgenre, but just like anyone, I have my preferences. Found footage replicates a fantastical storyline that I would create in bed, or I'm daydreaming, or something along those lines. A director has taken this hypothetical situation that I think about and made it into their own version, but in a movie, and in return, it fuels my thoughts further. Maybe whenever I think about directing a movie and writing something, this is what I kind of think of. I love it because it gives me an opportunity to view the world created from an entirely different perspective that I would be commonly used to. And it was a perspective that I was not really familiar with, as I mentioned before. The first person perspective gives the viewer a subjective experience, which obviously has its pros and cons, which I'll touch upon in a minute. Alongside the fact that you're inseparable from the character, the movie almost becomes personal, so maybe that's why I have such a connection with the movies mentioned. I also love the fact that it is budget friendly. You could create a found footage movie for the fraction of the price that it would cost to produce a standard non-POV horror movie. But these movies aren't perfect and have generally not received great ratings, and they're not really common. So why are POV movies not really being made in general, or why are they not as popular? Please remember that everything I say is in my opinion. It's so hard to develop a world if you're seeing everything from one perspective. You don't get a proper glimpse into the world of the threat, and since you're spending so much time with the person who's sharing the same view as you, you're only seeing their side of everything. And at times, even these characters aren't really developed properly, so you're just left with the basic boring storyline combined with some jump scares now and then. And it's not always one character, it can be a group, but the same principle applies. The director really needs to craft a character or characters who you would want to spend time with. A whole hour and a half or even more with somebody can be really tedious. So when the viewer is presented with a movie that is shot in the third person, this can become a lot less tedious by including jumping between characters and timelines and so on. Simultaneously, the world building and the main threat or threats of the movie need to be captured extremely well, which is really difficult because it's usually done via dialogue or expression of fear by the character who you're sharing the world with. But saying that, it's a form that simply feels like it just gets old really quickly, which is a shame. Blair Witch, for example, worked extremely well because it felt entirely new, and even after watching it for the first time, I had to Google if it was real. There was something so terrifying about the fact that it felt so real and something that could happen to me. Robert Ebert, I don't even know if I'm saying his name right, said in a review of the movie from 1999, "The movie is like a celebration of rock bottom production values, of how it doesn't take bells and whistles to scare us, and, quote, at the time when digital techniques can show us almost anything. The Blair Witch Project is a reminder that what really scares us is the stuff we can't see." But back to my point. At the same time, all the action must be from the point of view that you see. And creating something insane, over the top, or even extremely dramatic can be very difficult to achieve, as there's no cutaways to kind of like build suspense. Also, there's an extremely important element of movies, which is to be able to see different versions of the same thing. And this is taken away in POV movies. So after a viewer sees multiple POV horror movies, it can almost feel like the same premise, and maybe that's why it gets kind of dull. Also, one small thing, which is also really important, dialogue coming from the voice that you cannot see can also be confusing for the audience and disengage the viewer. It's definitely quite upsetting, but I feel like one day, well, hopefully one day, there's just going to be a POV horror movie that's just going to change the game. Or maybe I'm just projecting my hopes and wanting to relive my teenage years where I discovered this area of film. As all movies, there's a balancing act. An interesting character needs to be developed. An interesting world needs to be shown to the audience while simultaneously making the movie engaging and continuously making POV a big part of the story. And the audience needs to enjoy what they're seeing. So to me, it seems like a really difficult task to achieve, and that can be simplified by not shooting movies in that way. But finally, I feel like the POV aesthetic would be just so fitting right now and would create an interesting creative opportunity for movies. But time will tell. Or maybe I'm not exposed to these movies. So please, 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 if you have some recommendations of amazing POV horror movies or just in general POV movies, please let me know. Hello, welcome to the end of this video. This is a really weird and unusual style of video for me to make. This is the first time I'm using a script and just reading it into a microphone and not being present on the screen the entire time. So it's a little bit weird and I'm not really used to it, but please let me know what you thought of it. And if you've made it this far into the video, thank you. But also, can you please recommend me some great POV horror movies that you kind of love, that you feel like kind of been overlooked? Just stuff like that. Leave it in the comments and I will definitely watch them, because as you can tell by this video, I fucking love those sort of movies, and I just kind of feel like it's difficult to find new ones that I have not seen. So definitely recommend me some. And I always ask at the end of all of my videos, what movie should I watch next? Let me know in the comments or anywhere else you can find me, which is Instagram at paulxkolobov. And thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.